Welcome to Resting Places Learning Spaces, the podcast where we explore cemeteries, memorial spaces, and more, and the lessons they hold for history, memory, and education. I'm Dr. Hilary Van Dyke, and today we're taking a closer look at Memorial Park Cemetery and the incredible work that's been done to preserve its history and honor those buried there. My guest is Aileen Henderson, who has been deeply involved in protecting this cemetery from developers. We'll also explore how teachers can bring this space into their classrooms. Memorial Park Cemetery was established in 1919 and is one of the oldest Black American cemeteries in Tampa. It's a 20-acre cemetery in East Tampa. While there are over 13,000 unmarked graves and 6,000 visible headstones, the exact number is unknown. Among the buried are a variety of types of people, from war veterans to the cigar factory workers and more. According to the Black Cemetery Network, quote, in 1923, the southwest portion of the Memorial Park Cemetery was dedicated to Black American veterans. This was done by the American Legion Women's Auxiliary as well as a branch of the American Red Cross. They dedicated the Florida Negro World War Veterans Memorial. This makes sense here because of the variety of veterans who are buried. There's at least one Civil War veteran and veterans from nearly each 20th century war that America participated in. As such, Memorial Park Cemetery represents, quote, over 150 years of American military history. Mr. John Robinson owned and managed the cemetery until his death in 2019. Maintenance for the cemetery was pretty difficult, and so it was not entirely properly managed for much of its recent history. Thus, the city of Tampa began maintaining the 20-acre cemetery. We'll talk through how the city came to own it, but what is made public is that to officially own it, the city placed a lien on it and foreclosed it. They planned to buy it at a county auction. However, a real estate investor bought the cemetery for $18,000 during the day it was put up for auction. And after community uproar, Tampa bought the cemetery back for $100,000. Later, you will hear from Miss Aileen, who sees that official record of how things went down differently. In July 2024, the city unveiled a historical marker at the C. Blythe Public Library. Unlike other Black cemeteries in Tampa that were developed over during the years, this site remained uncovered. Please introduce yourself and any relevant information about you.
My name is Aileen Henderson. I am the founder of the Cemetery Society. I am a fifth generation of Tampa. My family started in Ybor City, so that's where my roots are. On my grandfather's side, they are from Asturias, Spain, so I am a member of the Centro Asturiano Las Damas de Asturias. So there's some deep roots here in Tampa for me and my ancestors. And so Tampa is very important to me. And it's all of Tampa, right? And it's a very diverse city. There's all kinds of cultures that we experience here. It's not just the Latin or the Hispanic. It's not just the Black. It is Italian, which, my uncle, my godfather, he's Italian. He's full-blooded Sicilian, and he's a member of the Italian Club. So there's a lot of diversity in Tampa, and my heritage is a part of that diversity. And I started the Cemetery Society because I had gone through this project at Woodlawn Cemetery here in Tampa. Now, Woodlawn Cemetery, I actually have a lot of family buried in Woodlawn Cemetery. And as a little girl, when my family moved to Ybor City, they then moved to an area of Tampa called Riverside Heights, which is part near Tampa Heights, Seminole Heights. It's off of North Boulevard, but it's blocks from the Woodlawn Cemetery. So when they moved over here, my great-grandmother and my grandfather, we all lived in the same neighborhood, and my grandfather actually built a house, and I grew up in that house with my grandmother. We would go to that cemetery and other cemeteries in Tampa. When I was a little girl, we would get the gladiolas from Hutto's, and if you're from Tampa, you know exactly what I'm talking about, Hutto's Corner. And then it was just her and I, and that's how we would spend our day. okay, is placing gladiolas on our family members at these different cemeteries in Tampa. So, you grow up and you forget about all those memories. And then in 2020, 2021, somebody texts me and says, hey, did you know the property's for sale, or they're trying to rezone the property at Woodlawn? And so I didn't. And so I started investigating, and then all those memories start coming back to me, right? And I start learning about the cemetery again, because now I'm on a mission to save technically Woodlawn Cemetery.
Right.
Through all of that, by the way, there's a story where we couldn't find my great aunt and uncle. We didn't know where they were. We knew they had been buried at Central Asturiano, which is part of Woodlawn, but we'd lost them. And my grandmother and her sisters took it to their grave. Well, I get goosebumps when I talk about it. During this quest to save the cemetery, we found them, and they ended up being 3 rows away from where the development was going to go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was heart-wrenching
Yeah.
to know that, number one, we found them, and then number two, they could possibly not be able to continue to rest in peace because of the development and the townhomes that they were planning on putting there. So long story short, we Victoria and City Council did not vote to rezone the property, and we thought, okay, case closed, all is good. It's at that time that I said, who's watching out for these historic cemeteries?
Right.
And I was guilty of it. I can't pretend like I wasn't, but I was guilty of it too. And so I said, I think this is what I want to do. I think I want to just put together an organization where, and honestly, Hillary, for me, it was really about doing a cleanup once a month at the cemeteries. That's what I signed up for.
Done a lot more than that.
Yes, indeed. But for me, it was going to be once a month. We'd get our volunteers. We'd show up with our little coffee, our little danishes. We'd go clean, 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 clean. Happy, happy, happy. We're happy. The cemetery stays at peace. It stays clean. We're giving back to Tampa. Yeah, no, it didn't. What the Cemetery Society has become, and what my life has become, which, by the way, is not my paying job. I don't get paid to do this in any capacity. I do have a full-time job, and I've been there for 28 years. So I'm on the heels of retirement, but it has become just, I can't even say it's a hobby. It's really become a full-time job for me, taking care of these historic cemeteries, because every time I think, oh, okay, great, now I get to go do some of the things I really want to do. And one of the projects I want to bring forth is I want to go to these different cemeteries that are under Tampa. They're historic public cemeteries. And I want to find the writers and the poets that are buried there. And then I want to have a day where we go to their markers and we read from their material. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
I mean, those are the kinds of things I really want to do, but I find myself wrapped up in, really, it feels almost like a war. I'm at war with the city or developers or private owners to protect these sacred places. And it's a lot.
That work of protecting the sacred places, I think, is how I ended up finding your name. You have been involved with some work with Memorial Park Cemetery. So I'm interested in learning about how you first became involved in Memorial Park Cemetery.
So it's by accident that I became involved with Memorial Park Cemetery, and I love telling this story. And every time I tell the story, even now, I got goosebumps again. Sometimes the universe or the spirits, they're manipulating what's happening. I really, truly believe that. It fell in my lap. What happened is I started the Cemetery Society. I started communicating with the Parks Department, with the city of Tampa, and I had to give them my dates that I would go and clean those cemeteries so that they were made aware. I was waiting for them to get back to me for the approval of Oaklawn Cemetery in downtown Tampa, and waiting for the city of Tampa to give me the approval for Oaklawn Cemetery so I could promote it and let my volunteers know. And when they emailed me back to give me the approval, they also said, oh, hey, by the way, if you want to continue cleaning Memorial Park Cemetery, because I'd already done 2 cleanups at Memorial Park Cemetery, you'll have to contact the new owner. And then gave me the owner's information. Now, I'm very green, right? This is something I've never been involved in anything like this. I just want to clean cemeteries.
Right.
So I look at this information and I am shocked. I'm like, what are you talking about? I didn't know it was for sale. So what I did was I sent it to 4 people that I had networked with that I didn't know them very well, but I knew that they were solid people and they would be able to give me direction. And what happened then was these folks got it to the media. And within 2 days, I had a call from a news station. And within 3 days, I had a call from Tampa Bay Times.
Wow.
And within 5 days, it was in the newspaper on Tuesday. I'll never forget it. I will never forget it. It hit the news by Tuesday.
Hmm.
I was terrified. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I was terrified.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, I technically blew the whistle
Right.
on the fact that this cemetery had been sold. Well, Hillary, then I started doing the digging because it was out there. And what I found was disgusting, despicable, reprehensible.
Mm.
Because what I found is that for 2 years after the owner died, the city of Tampa had been working behind closed doors to get rid of that cemetery.
Mm.
Okay, 2 years. And they placed the liens against it and so on and so forth, which forced it into foreclosure, which
Right.
then forced it to go to auction. But see,
Right.
what they don't tell you and what my research found is when properties go to auction, you have to make that public record. That means you have to put it in the newspaper. Now, if you're from Tampa, and I'm not sure I don't know if you are from Tampa, but if you're from Tampa, everybody knows that if you want to get information out to the Black community, this is a Black cemetery, so you would think you'd want to let the community know it's up for sale. You put it in the Florida Sentinel.
Hmm.
Everybody knows that. That's not a secret. Well, let me tell you where the city of Tampa decided to advertise. They decided to advertise in La Gaceta.
Mm.
Now, I'm not saying that Black folks don't read the La Gaceta, but I'll tell you what newspaper they do read. And they didn't do this just once. They advertised it in La Gaceta twice. My point there is you had the opportunity to make it right and you didn't.
That's interesting I didn't know that the city has to put it in the newspaper or like advertise it in that way.
Yeah, no, they didn't do right. They did not do right. So when I found all of that out, I was on fire. I was on fire and I was not very nice about it. And I screamed from the rooftops. I literally did. And I'll tell you what, we got about 15 people and we went to a meeting that our mayor was hosting. She was hosting these neighborhood meetings. And so she had one in, God, I can't remember the name of it. Was it Reagan Park? It might have been Reagan Park. I think it was at Reagan Park. And we all decided to go. And of course, they opened it up for questions. And then I stood up and I started telling the story
Hmm.
that I just told you, that I was notified via email, that it hit the media, that they were working behind closed doors for 2 years to place the liens against it, to force it into foreclosure. And you could have heard a pin drop when I said to them, and you have to advertise that and make it public knowledge. And let me ask you all, where do you think that they advertised? Where do you think that they put that public notice?
Mm.
Where should they put that public notice? And you heard the crowd, they go, Florida Sentinel. I go, yeah, no, La Gaceta.
Mm.
Could have heard a pin drop. And I think it was at that moment the mayor was like, oh my goodness.
Mm.
Because then the crowd went a little cuckoo for Cocoa Pops. Okay. Which is what I was hoping for. And
Right.
then we were able to get on record her saying that they were going to get that cemetery. Because that is the first time that they finally said they were going to get the cemetery, because we were met with a lot of pushback. We're not in the business of cemeteries. And if you've ever seen me at council, you'll hear me say that. I know you all say you're not in the business of cemeteries, but guess what? You are. So get used to it, embrace it. So we were getting that pushback. We were being told, we're not buying the cemetery. We don't want this cemetery. Lord, for the first time, I think she realized the community was not going to stand for it. So gratefully, they did the right thing. But that's after they allowed it to be sold to a property flipper
Right. From
for
what I saw, it was sold for 18, and then they had to,
$18,000.
and that city then had to buy back for 100,000, right?
$100,000. That is correct. So by the way, their story, the city of Tampa's story that was told to the media, that is on record, the city representative, when they were questioned, well, what happened at the auction? And what they said was, well, we fell asleep at the wheel. I kid you not. That's what was said.
Yeah, that's what I read, is that it was not intentional, that it was that it outbid.
Really? Oh, come on. It's a good thing they can't see my face, because I am not buying it. This was intentional. It was done for 2 years behind closed doors. The negotiating, the liens, forcing it into come on, give me a break. And then you put it in La Gaceta. Who's going to see it in La Gaceta?
Mhm.
It was a fluke. And to this day, I don't know if that city employee knew that I would run with it or not.
Mhm.
Because truth is, I could have sat on it and we would have lost it.
Right.
Nobody would have been the wiser, because that information was given to me after the auction, after it was sold. So I often think about that, what possessed me What possessed me to share that information? I don't know what possessed me. I have no idea.
And if you hadn't, I mean, it would have ended up as like a something, a building, a house. I don't know.
Hillary, it would have been one more example of Tampa sliding, and that is a very light word to use
Hmm.
because I know the reality of how our Black community has been treated. But it would
Hmm.
have been one more thing to add to that.
Right.
And that's sad to me. That's very, very sad. But then when I see a historic marker that is deserving to be there for a cemetery that is finally getting the recognition that it should and the attention, and then not to be completely accurate is heartbreaking. But here's what I do know.
Hmm.
What I do know, and this is why I stood down and did not correct the marker. My friend, Noreen Copeland Miller, and she passed last November. Here's what she said to me. She says, Eileen, you don't understand our life and what we've lived. And she was in her 70s. If we don't move forward, even with the mistakes, we will never get it.
Right.
And I told her, I said, that goes against my grain because I believe in always doing the right thing and making it right from the beginning. But I can see how important this is to you and how important this is going to be the community. So I will keep my big mouth shut.
Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the cemetery and why it was founded, and then maybe some of the discrepancies between the history
Sure.
and
I mean, it's simple. History is a very strange thing when you're working with it because we don't have a lot of the information for Black history. It's lost, forgotten. And my understanding and my research indicates that it was the overflow from Zion Cemetery. And yes, Black servicemen were buried there, or so were other citizens of the community, but the veterans section was not established until 1923. And the first serviceman to be put in that particular area, and let me look it up because I always get it wrong and I never get the name correct. The Florida Negro, the
Florida
Florida
for
Negro
World
World,
War Veterans Memorial.
right. And I always get it a little confused because we do have somebody that's a politician here in Tampa that says it's the World War One monument, and that is inaccurate. Again, not true. It's not specific to any war. I always want to make sure that we're using the right terminology because it's even on the monument,
Okay.
and that's that's important to me to make sure that we're accurate. I
Right.
don't care, good, bad, and ugly. It doesn't matter to me. So, yeah, the Florida Negro World War Monument. Again, that was established in 1923. The first veteran buried there was Benny Little, was his name.
Hmm.
It's in the newspaper. I have the newspaper clippings, and it talks about how the Women's Auxiliary secured a section of Memorial Park Cemetery that would be exclusive to the Black veterans. Again, not till 1923.
Right.
So again, for me, when you read a historic marker and it's claiming that the cemetery was established to bury Black veterans, then that's a partial truth. That's not the real truth. The real truth is that it was an overflow from Zion, much like Woodlawn was for Oaklawn. Okay,
Mm.
Oaklawn Cemetery became full. They opened Woodlawn. That was the overflow.
Okay.
Zion Cemetery became full. They needed another location.
Okay. Memorial Park.
We established Memorial Park Cemetery.
So Memorial Park Cemetery is founded essentially as an overflow for Zion. At the time that you were doing the cleanups, what would you say was like the condition of the cemetery?
Oh gosh. First of all, there was no fence. There was not a fence around the cemetery, which was astonishing to me. Why it really was in dire straits. There were unsheltered, sleeping on above ground mausoleums, dead chickens everywhere, and that's from the religious sacrifices.
Mm.
Not dead chickens because they rolled up and
Right.
died. No,
Right.
eggplants. Eggplants are a part of the religious ceremony where cemeteries are death. They're calling upon, I think there's a goddess, and they give her the eggplants. Chicken bones. I found chicken bones one day strung with red ribbon in one of the bushes over by the veterans section. It was crazy,
Mm-hmm.
unacceptable. Just a lack of respect for those that are buried there. I preach all the time about resting in peace, right? When we're alive and we think about death, we think about resting in peace, right? That's our goal, to be able to rest in peace when we're alive. And so when we die and we're put into these cemeteries, we're dead, right? So we don't know what's happening. We mate, spirit, souls, I get it. But I do think it's the living's responsibility to provide that rest in peace expectation And I
Right.
can tell you what was happening at Memorial Park Cemetery, those souls were not resting.
Mm,
And that's sad to me. It's really sad because we know how old some of those graves are, and we know the lives that they lived were not easy lives.
right.
And again, the expectation is at least in death they can rest.
That's just like so common with historically black cemeteries. It's really, really frustrating for sure. In a lot of the work that I do when I'm looking at historically black cemeteries, it's just like I can predict the things that happen to the cemetery over the years based on like a lack of having the perpetual care, never being designated for that land. And in the case of Memorial Park Cemetery, despite everything that happened, it is still great that the city owns it now because now it's actually going to be maintained in ways that it just wouldn't be without the city stepping in because people just don't have the resources and organizations don't have the resources to keep a cemetery regularly kept up.
Here's the beauty of Memorial Park Cemetery also that a lot of people don't know. I happen to know because I've been working with the cemetery for a while, but the city has a resource to help keep maintain that. And that resource is the East Tampa CRA. I happen to sit on the East Tampa CAC, which is the community action, the what's it called? Community Citizens Action Committee. East Tampa, I don't know what it is. East Tampa CAC. Basically, it's an advisory council to the East Tampa CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency.
Hmm.
So it sits in those boundaries for the East Tampa CRA, the cemetery does. And now it has a fence, a beautiful black wrought iron fence.
Right.
And that was paid for by the East Tampa CRA. Right now, we're looking at the restoration of the monument for the veterans, that
Mhm.
little red brick monument that's there with the pointy top.
Yeah.
It just came before the CAC at our meeting 2 weeks ago, and I think it's $15,000 is what it's going to cost to be able to get it restored. And that's all coming out of the CRA, that funding, which are tax dollars that are,
Mhm.
I don't know if you know a lot about the CRAs, but it's money that is taxed that goes into this fund specific to whatever boundary. Memorial Park Cemetery happens to sit in that CRA. And I just had a conversation with the City of Tampa Cemetery coordinator who said there's some things that, the cemetery needs, there's some bent bars. And I said, don't ever forget, you have the CRA behind you. One of the things I was able to do at the CAC meeting was to get them to put more funding into the historic preservation part of our line items for our budget. And I think we're up to, want to say we got it up to 500,000, but we've got the support of
Right.
the committee, and that money is there specifically, as far as I'm concerned, to take care of Memorial Park Cemetery for whatever its needs are. So we don't have to rely just on city council or that budget. There's
Right.
another funding source, and those are important things to have, because so many times you'll hear from the government, we don't have the funding, we don't have the funding. Guess what? We've got a backup plan. And that makes me really happy to know that we've got those funds sitting there in case we need them.
Have you looked into the grants for African American cemeteries from the state of Florida?
Yeah, so here's the problem. We cannot receive one of those grants because there are still active burials in that cemetery, and the grant is
Okay.
contingent on it not
Right.
being an active
It
cemetery.
being an abandoned cemetery. Yeah, in quote marks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha. Are there any oral histories or personal stories connected to specific graves in Memorial Park Cemetery that stand out to you?
I'm going to go back to Noreen Copeland Miller. Again, there's a story there too. I didn't know who she was before Memorial Park Cemetery. I had no idea who this woman was. I met her at City Council when we went to go talk to council about the cemetery being sold, because at that time nobody knew. The article had just come out on Tuesday. Council was Thursday. So I show up with a few people that are Cemetery Society supporters and support of historic cemeteries, so we could go speak to council about it. And while we're sitting there, my friend and Ray Reed, I don't know if you know or have heard of his name, but he was instrumental in finding the documents for Zion Cemetery. He's a
So,
wealth of information. They give him some recognition at Zion even to this day. There's another cemetery too that he gets some recognition. Anyway, he and I were there together with another friend, and he leans in when he sees Noreen Copeland Miller and he goes, "You need to go talk to her. You need to know who she is, because she's who you need to be in touch with." So I went and I introduced myself, and she was a little like, "Okay, who's this crazy, lady coming to talk to me?" But she was very nice. So we all went back and sat down. I didn't know why she was there. She didn't know why I was there. So it wasn't until we all spoke that we realized we were there for the same thing. On
Mhm.
my way out, the mayor's assistant, hey, Eileen, can I get your card? And I said, sure. And Noreen was standing there. I walked over to her and I said to her, I said, I'm going to get your cemetery back. I promise you that. I'm going to get your cemetery back. You have my word. And she kind of looked at me like, who is this white lady? What is she bringing me? And so I can say that because I know Noreen and we've talked. I mean, she's passed, but we had talked and talked and talked about that day. And so I went to leave and then I turned around and I said, I have to ask you something. I have an interview today at the cemetery at 1:30 at Memorial Park Cemetery. And I heard you speak at council. And the truth is, this isn't my story. This is your story. She had a dozen family members buried there. One of them was her mom. And I said to her, I really would love for you to be able to do that interview because, the people need to hear from you, not from me. And she says, well, I'll think about it. I said, okay. So I get to the cemetery and she showed up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I watched that interview.
The rest is history in terms of our friendship. We were literally joined at the hip until she passed.
Oh.
And so when you ask me about the stories, I think of the stories that she would tell me. I think about the stories when she would say, as a little girl, Eileen, this was the only cemetery where we felt safe, where we could play, because we couldn't go to the playgrounds like other people. And so those are the stories of Memorial Park Cemetery that I cherish most because she cherished them the most. And then, of course, her family was there that she would visit on a regular basis. So there's tons of people buried at Memorial Park Cemetery. I'm going to drop this little gem in your lap, and I know people keep ignoring me, but that's okay because there will come a time where they're going to have to address it. We have documentation where there are at least 15,000 unmarked graves at Memorial Park Cemetery that nobody wants to talk about. And that's okay because we're going to talk about it. Now it's not the time, but there's going to be an opportunity and I'm going to run through it like a bull in a china shop. But I keep telling people we have the documentation, we have the research, we're willing to have you take it to an actuary to check our facts. So we have 15,000 unmarked graves at Memorial Park Cemetery.
Whew. How do you envision the next generation interacting with the cemetery? What does preservation look like 5 or 10 years from now for Memorial Park?
Let me say this. I think it's going to be difficult to keep people interested because we're fighting so many other battles, right? And who cares about cemeteries, right? I mean, I've had people say to me, well, they're dead anyway. Who cares? Well, I hear you. And I can certainly appreciate that perspective. But the truth of the matter is that those dead people are our history. And my tagline has always been from day one, there is no future without our past.
Mm.
And so cemeteries bring so many things to the table. They're walking museums. They could very well be the only green space we have left
Mhm.
in 50 years or so.
Mhm.
So my idea or my thoughts or my goals in terms of preservation for Memorial Park Cemetery may be seen through rose-colored glasses because I know what I want. The hard part with preservation is convincing everybody else that they want it too.
Right.
And that's a lot of what I do. I have, even with when I sit on the CAC, and usually it's an easy sell, but asking $15,000 to restore a 4-foot marker, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money that East Tampa needs.
Right.
So that for me is the hardest part of preservation, whether it's today, whether it's 5 or 10 years from now. It's convincing folks that we need it.
Right.
So, and that'll take me right into, it's a great segue. When we start talking about that, that's where we look for ways to invite the people in. How do we bring them in? How do we engage them? We do things like I mentioned to you. We look to see, have a poetry day and read the work from those that are buried there. I want to start networking with, those places where you can go and you get to sip the wine and draw, paint the paint, whatever they call it, paint and sip, sip and paint. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I have a concept also where I mean, and I can see the vision. It's in my head that we have these folks with their easels in a cemetery painting. Now we can't drink wine. I don't think the city would let us, but that's okay. I think preservation, in order to maintain the interest, we're going to have to become creative on engagement.
Right.
That would include tours.
Mhm.
And I'm not just talking day tours. I'm talking, why don't we take a page from St. Augustine or Savannah, New York, any place where there is historic cemeteries where they do ghost tours.
I was gonna say the ghost tours or the Halloween tours.
Absolutely. And I think we can make that happen. But for me, preservation has to go hand in hand with engagement of the community so we keep their interest and we just keep taking care of our history.
I know a person when you're ready for your paint and sip idea.
Yeah, well, and that, and that's my pitch to the city and Visit Tampa Bay. Why are we not capitalizing on our historic cemeteries?
Yeah.
We need to.
The
I
and
just
the
got to
city,
convince
I
them.
feel like Tampa has so many too that it just seems like there's something they should be able to do.
One would think. The other thing too that we have to think about, and Memorial Park Cemetery would not be a very good example of it because there's just no space. There's just no space.
Mhm.
But in terms of historic cemeteries, we do have a couple of them under the city of Tampa that have green space, which is actually most of the time when you see green space at a cemetery, it's usually the
Unmarked.
potter's field,
Yeah.
unmarked graves.
Right.
Correct. So when I look at places like Woodlawn, that is acres and acres and acres, huge cemetery. I've talked to a councilman about this before. Well, why aren't we looking at doing scatter gardens? That's an active cemetery. Woodlawn Cemetery, while historic, is still very, very active. But we have this huge potter's field. We're not generating revenue for them to become self-sustainable. We have to start looking at those kinds of options. A columbarium, you could probably plot out a space at Memorial Park Cemetery where we could put a columbarium. Because the truth of the matter is, we're not going to be able to keep burying people in the ground
Right.
because there's no space to do that.
Yeah.
Even, I hear, well, but you can bury them and they become biodegradable. There's this process. And I hear you and I get it. But where are you going to find the space to even do that? Right. Because I don't believe in disturbing those that are already there. If we
Mm,
already have graves on site, I do not 100% agree with disturbing any of
right.
them, not
Right.
even to reinter them somewhere. Leave them alone. I'm
Right.
adamant about that. But I do think we could probably carve out enough space to build a columbarium. And those technically can be built vertically. They don't have to be necessarily wide, but you could look at some type of a vertical base and people could still then be buried at Memorial Park Cemetery if they wanted to. And we could start generating revenue to help them become self sustainable. So we
Mhm.
don't have to necessarily rely on those budgets all the time. Because I can
Right.
tell you this, it's budget time right now in the city of Tampa. That's what they're working on. And imagine me walking up to council, and I do, asking them to allocate funds for historic cemeteries when I have people in different parts of the city after these storms.
Right.
I mean, that's a hard sell, right? That's a
Right.
really hard sell. But if I put it in terms of, well, if we invest, then we can look to generate revenue. Well, now I'm talking their language, right? Because now I'm not just asking for a handout. I'm giving you resolution
Mhm.
and opportunity. That's a little different than just asking them to give me money.
Right. With all of the work that the Cemetery Society does, with all of the work happening at Memorial Park Cemetery, if listeners are listening and thinking about how do I help, how do I get involved, how do folks support the work that you do?
Well, I have a Facebook page, and I know that is, with all of the social media that's out there. In fact, it's funny that you bring this up because my son just said to me today, Mom, I know you're working for that other cemetery right now, but really, you need to get on TikTok. I don't have a TikTok account.
You need to get on TikTok. And there's a big cemetery community on TikTok. So I
And
think
he
stuff would
said
play
that,
really well.
telling you just today on the way home, he was like, Mom, and I'm like, Son, I said, you manage it for me. I said, I've already got a Facebook page and it's pretty active. I have, only 500 follow. It's a difference between followers and likes. I still don't understand how that works. I also have an Instagram page. I don't get a lot of traffic there, but I have a website and not a lot of information there either. But mostly, if you want to know about what the Cemetery Society is doing, definitely go to the Facebook page because it's always going to be posted there, no matter what. It will always be posted on Facebook. I'm going to work on other avenues for social media. If you need to get a hold of me, the cemetery society at gmail.com. Doesn't get easier than that, right? The cemetery society at gmail.com. So there's multiple ways to get a hold of me. If you want to get involved, all the events are always posted on Facebook. So you could come for a cleanup. You could come. We had a membership meeting last Saturday where I was so pleased. I had 11 confirmed speakers. And you know how it is. I don't know if you ever hold an event and your speakers always cancel. I had 11 confirmed, all 10 of them showed. The one that did not show was my major from the Tampa Police Department, and he had a very good excuse. So we forgave him. But that is unheard of to have all 10 show up. And so, Hillary, I have to tell you, in that room that day, the power to change how we think about historic cemeteries was there. And we had some people show up that were just members there to just, hear the speakers, but it was a phenomenal day and it was a start. I'm going to start doing that every 6 months. I think I'm going to cut the speakers though down. I think I'm going to have 10 again.
So I do want folks to hear that the website is thecemeterysociety.org.
Yes.
Email address is thecemeterysociety@gmail. The Facebook is facebook.com/The Cemetery Society. Same with Instagram, instagram.com, The Cemetery Society. I like that you have, like, it's the same thing across the way. That doesn't always happen with different platforms. And I'll just say the videos you have on Instagram, you can download those and just put them on TikTok. Just throwing it out there. You don't even have to make new content. You just post it across the 3 platforms. I'm just saying.
I got you. I got you. Well, I think you can connect them. And so I have been using CapCut for my videos.
And
And I
CapCut,
think
TikTok.
you can export it, and TikTok is one of the options.
Yep. See.
Okay. Problem is with the Cemetery Society is that I have gotten to a point, Hillary, that I need help. That's the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
I have been looking for somebody to help me with the social media. I do have a full-time job. It's the full-time job that pays me, that affords me the opportunity to do the things I do with the Cemetery Society. I'm at a point, and this is why your timing was perfect when you sent that email. Your timing was perfect because I'm at a point where I'm ready to ask for help. I'm ready to delegate some of the work that needs to be done.
Right.
And I recognize social media is definitely hurting because first of all, I don't have the skill set, right? I'm going to be 60 in a few weeks. And while I may be self-taught because I am a Gen Xer, although my son calls me the baby boomer, I'm not a baby boomer. I'm 1965 when Gen X started. Thank you very much. And we did teach ourselves everything, right? We didn't have the luxury like my son did, his generation, that he was kind of born with it all, right? With that skill set. So I recognize my weakness, and that is social media. And I need that. And I need somebody to help me with that. I really need an assistant to help me keep track of all of the projects that I work on, because, outside of quote unquote saving cemeteries, I'll get the emails, hey, I can't find my aunt, or I'm looking for my mom, or I'm looking for my grandmother. And unfortunately, I don't have the time to dedicate to that. Now, normally what I'll do, I have a couple of people that love doing research, and I'll send it to them. And hey, can you do this? But I really like to have a dedicated position. The Cemetery Society, I think, is experiencing some growing pains right now. And my visions are so large that I'm going to have to start putting people in place to keep up with all of the things that we need to do. I mean, I think about the cemetery. I haven't forgotten about it. A reporter told me about a cemetery over at Keystone and asked me for help. This was 2 years ago. I've never forgotten. I just don't have the time.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a lot of work, but I love it. I can't wait to retire.
Then you'll be doing this full time.
I will be.
Yeah.
If I could afford to do it, and I did do the numbers, if I could afford to walk away from my job, I would do it. I would do it because this is so rewarding and fulfilling that, yeah, I can't wait to retire.
You're close.
I have 5 years, 5 more years. I'm going to do 2 years till I hit 30. And then I'm going to do 3 years in the drop.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you again for just, I don't know, telling your story, not just Memorial Park Cemetery, but even the work you do in general is really, really admirable.
Appreciate you. Listen, anytime I can get the message out there, anytime we can talk about Memorial Park Cemetery, I don't ever want history to repeat itself. And unfortunately, we just seem to get stuck in this cycle when it comes to Black cemeteries. I am so grateful to be able to talk about it, to share the story. I don't ever want what happened to Memorial Park Cemetery to happen again, ever. The city will become responsible. They will take action because I'm going to hold them accountable.
Right.
And we will not let this happen again.
Hey, Michelle, I haven't seen you in so long.
It has been a while, but it is great to be back.
Sorry, y'all. I'm facetious. We're recording 3 conversations at once, if I'm being honest. But to y'all, it's going to feel like 2 months of conversations. But we're just sitting in the same room together for like an hour.
It is so much learning, though.
True.
It just takes up the time.
True. But yes, so I'm thinking about Memorial Park Cemetery. Had a really great conversation, Miss Aileen. And I had a few ideas originally of what I could imagine teachers doing with the topic. So before I talked to her, I thought about the idea of them researching an individual buried in the cemetery and connecting their life to larger historical events. And the one that I was really thinking about was World War I. And then, of course, after talking to her, I was like, well, I guess maybe that wasn't actually the purpose of the cemetery originally. So really any sort of big event that was happening within the cemetery's early history. But basically really researching an individual and then thinking about their life through the lens of a big historical event. Do you have any thoughts about that? Like, does that seem possible in a classroom situation?
No, absolutely. Anytime we can connect actual people to historical events, it's going to make it more relevant to students, and it's going to make it more engaging, because there's a huge difference between being able to talk about a person's story and to talk about events minus actual individual people.
Right.
And so, the more we can connect stories, the better. The better the narrative, the more engaged the students will be.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing I was thinking about was just maps, generally speaking, making maps, digital maps, paper maps of the cemetery, and then even to whatever extent possible, looking at how the different sections based on death dates, how they might like kind of shift over time. But yeah, any thoughts about that?
So I wasn't even thinking in that direction, but that's really interesting. So thinking about how the cemetery itself has been constructed and has been filled out over time, right? How they chose where they started with the burials and how they expanded from there. If different sections, maybe were for different families and they had plots set aside for others that they knew would be, eventually joining them in their resting places. So that is really interesting. And that could be good for students to practice their cartography skills, which is something that they don't get a lot of practice in.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I got recently to practice my cartography skills when I was in California. And I was doing the Half Dome hike, and on the way back I was like on by myself for a pretty big chunk of it, and I almost went the wrong direction at a fork that would have added literal hours for me, because I'm such a slow walker. And ultimately, I pulled out the All Trails map, and I was like, okay. And I used my skills from back in the day. They busted out. But yeah, I definitely think, I don't know to what extent students really get to learn maps in school still, but I just feel like that is really important.
It is very important. And no, you're right. It is not even anymore a course that students take in pre-K 12 education. It is built into our social studies courses where kids are looking at maps to determine different things, but practicing using the maps for themselves. We have it on our phones.
Right.
But the thing with our phones is that it shows our little dot and a little path that we should take. And if for some reason that should not be available to us, we are kind of out of luck. So
and that was basically the case, because I had downloaded the map, but I wasn't like following it. So I just pulled it up and saw where I was, and then had to by myself make that determination. So getting to practice like at a young age, even just making a map, I feel like would make you even more understanding of how this stuff works.
And we talk about mental mapping in social studies that students need to have. They need to be able to close their eyes and have a picture of what the location looks like from above, right? That's maps. It's the bird's eye view. And so we do want them to practice mental mapping so that when they are in situations where that is called upon, they can do it.
Right. What else were you thinking about when you were listening to the interview about what could be done?
Yeah. So my thinking went in 2 directions. And the shorter of the 2 to start with was the memorial nature of the cemetery and the connection, whether it was that connection from the beginning or because now they do have a memorial there for the World Wars, that again, we have required instruction in Florida for Veterans Day, for Memorial Day, and for honoring our veterans. And so so having these spaces in our communities where students can make those connections that, oh, yeah, that war happened over somewhere else, but there were people from my community that were part of that. That's really important. So even if it's teachers bringing in images of those memorials because they can't perhaps go to the cemetery for some kind of a ceremony to memorialize veterans there, but just being able to see these things and understand this is in my community and people from my community have been part of those greater historical events.
Right.
So that's one. And then another, I was really struck. It was about, I don't know if this will be the same when it's finally all said and done, but about 28 minutes in, conversation came to the city ownership of the space and how that then can protect the space.
Right.
And so my thinking goes immediately to our benchmarks around government services and obligations to communities, and also the difference between federalism, which is the national level, state level, local level, and that the local level has the most impact on our daily lives. We really want students to understand that at the local level, they can see the impact of local government the greatest. So whether those are spaces that are being protected or whether those are spaces where the government is providing services, even so things like the dump or the water treatment facility. So there are spaces within our communities that are controlled by the government for different purposes, and all of those purposes are to serve us.
Right.
And then again, the entire episode was just full of the citizens involved in taking action when they see a problem and they're working to address that problem. And towards the end of the conversation, I was struck too, where at first it seemed like, okay, we're glad that local government has taken control of this space, but hold on, we need to make sure that there is still going to be funding to take care of the space. So just because it now has become a public space doesn't mean that it's going to receive the care that it needs.
Right.
So that will still take the work of our communities to have local organizations that perhaps can, raise the funds, have an endowment that will help keep that space kept in the way that we want it to be.
It was really impressive that it is just normal humans, like regular humans who were like, yeah, this is not okay, and just pushed and pushed and pushed until the government did right by the space.
Yeah, because we can take it for granted that we think, oh, well, government will take care of this.
Right.
But that might not be the focus that our current government has. And so that is on us to make sure that our government is working in the way that we want it to and not just keep it on some pathway that we're not even aware of.
Yeah. And I would say specifically with cemeteries, like it's just rough managing them.
Yeah.
So what she was saying, where the city of Tampa was like, we're not in the business of cemeteries. And she was like, actually, you kind of are.
Right.
Because they do. There's like, I think, I'd have to look it up. There's several historical cemeteries that the city manages.
Right.
So they are ultimately in the business of cemeteries. So it makes sense.
But if you're not telling your government how you want it to do that, then it will not necessarily be doing that on your behalf.
Yeah, I'm looking to see how many cemeteries they manage. Let's see. So city cemeteries, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cemeteries. So sorry, y'all are in the business of cemeteries.
They're there.
Obviously there's more cemeteries in Tampa than that, but as far as the ones the city itself manages, definitely like that idea of really digging into that idea around civic engagement, and that becomes like a lifelong lesson.
It is.
That you take with you. So yes, in the case of a cemetery, but then also learning these different ways that in anything happening in your community, you can be a part of it.
Correct.
All right, Michelle. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me talking about Memorial Park Cemetery.
Absolutely. I love hearing the conversations of people within their communities taking action to help remember their past.
Well, that wraps up this episode of Resting Places Learning Spaces. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it with fellow educators, travelers, or anyone interested in the intersection of history and place. You can follow me on Instagram at Professor Van Dyke to continue the conversation or recommend a topic. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, every resting place has a story to tell.